Joining us now, Elizabeth Pipko, former GOP national spokesperson and former campaign aide, John McCarthy, former Biden advisor, and Behnam Ben Taleblu, senior Iran program director for the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. So, Behnam, first to you. What did you make today of the negotiations between Israel and Lebanon at the State Department? Historic. It seems like a process rather than something happening. It's concrete today. That's right. Pretty historic day. Stylistically, very important just to have the imagery of all these folks standing together, obviously brought together by the President and Secretary Rubio. But I would also say this, we don't want to judge this by giving it the moniker of success just yet. You know, there is still a shooting war going on in the Middle East right now. The Iranians are quite keen to get us to connect the dots. I think American diplomacy very cleverly needs to disconnect the dots between Tehran and Beirut. And the way you do that is actually to help Israel put pressure on this Shia militia in the south of Lebanon. And if you just look at the statements, the Lebanese government is more interested in sovereignty and turning that conflict off. And the Israelis are more interested in disarming Hezbollah. So while it's historic, stylistically very impactful, let's wait on heralding the substance as success just yet. And of course, there's been a lot of infiltration of Hezbollah into the Lebanese government as well, which is a big problem. But I want to get your reaction before we move to other topics and different discussions in the Iran debate. The Israeli ambassador also had some interesting words for France today. Of course, we're asking if France is going to get involved given their history with Lebanon. And he said, this is Ambassador Michael Leiter, "We certainly don't want the French anywhere near these negotiations. We like to keep the French as far away as possible from pretty much everything, but particularly when it comes to peace negotiations. They're not needed and they're not a positive influence." He's supposed to be a diplomat, but was very honest about the French position in this entire thing. I mean, to be brutally honest with you here, sometimes the truth does hurt. This is Macron's last year in office, and his foreign policy towards the Middle East has been very kaleidoscopic with respect to trying to figure out who his friends are and who his allies are in that part of the world. So I think this is a little bit of tough talk, but I think the French can handle it. Yeah, well, we'll see. Hopefully when they stay away, it's what they want. Elizabeth, what was your perspective on the talks today and also just the White House being optimistic about new talks this week with the Iranian regime?
Yeah, first of all, I don't think the French can handle anything, so I don't know. We'll find out. Look, I think President Trump deserves immense credit. He's trying not only to bring stability to the U.S., but also to Europe, to the Middle East, and beyond. He's spending his political capital on this. He's risking quite a bit to get this done. It's an administration that has proven that they want to risk quite a bit to get these peace goals really done in the few years that they have in office. We know what Hezbollah has done, not just in the region, but to innocent civilians around the world. We know what they've recently done to innocent Americans. And I think for him, this is an obvious choice. Everybody knows, like you said, this is not success just yet. We don't know what's going to happen. But this is worth the risk because it's going to protect, again, not just Americans, but universally innocent people for generations to come. John, let's take a listen to what Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said today during the historic meeting and, of course, its broader implications with the talks with Iran.
We're gathering that we hope to build on. And the hope today is that we can outline a framework upon which a permanent and lasting peace can be developed. So that, as I said, the people of Israel can live in peace and the people of Lebanon can live not just in peace, but the prosperity and security that they deserve.
So this is a very different approach than the Biden administration took.
Yeah, and I will say, you know, I think that people from both sides of the aisle should, of course, wish the president and the administration well on this, right? I think that people of goodwill across the board want to see a diplomatic solution. And if the president is projecting optimism on this, that's something we should all hope for, too. One of the things that I think politically has been interesting out of this has been the positioning of Secretary Rubio and Vice President Vance. That's something I've been paying a lot of attention to in the last 2 days. And I think it's because, obviously, there's a lot of chatter inside the Republican Party about the future of the Republican Party. And foreign policy tends to be a place where presidents and elected leaders can kind of show gravitas, show command. And I think that you've seen Vice President Vance sidelined in many ways in the past. And this has been an opportunity for him to step up into the field. I don't know that he's quite landed that, but I do think that Secretary Rubio's performance so far has been quite positive and shows him with a really kind of command of this issue area.
Elizabeth, do you want to weigh in on that aspect of it, the political implications of all of this? And presidents tend to, when they're elected to a second term, do more foreign policy in the second term. And, of course, the White House has talked about needing to get back to some domestic policy as well ahead of the midterms. Gas prices, of course, are an issue when it comes to this, but they're trying to make the point that America is now becoming the dominant provider of oil and gas and energy throughout the world, that this is a long-term play for some short-term pain.
Right. I mean, I think you pinpointed it. We have issues at home we have to deal with, and we have issues abroad. And Donald Trump has faced a lot of criticism for coming in, saying he's going to address a lot of the issues that we're dealing with at home, but also trying to tackle, foreign policy policy at the exact same time. So I think it makes perfect sense to have two very powerful men in your administration split those responsibilities. They may have different goals themselves. They may have different strengths themselves. And I think at this point in time, a lot of people are looking at this to see who's going to be the nominee. In 28, I'm looking at it to see who can help President Trump achieve, world peace.
Behnam, can we get your assessment of how the blockade of Iranian ports is going? What does that mean for the Iranian economy? What does that mean for China, for example? It's trying to get more oil out of Iran. Can't do it at this point because of the naval blockade. What is the status of that? CENTCOM just put out a new statement saying that 90% of Iran's economy is based on imports and exports by sea. So where are we in this process?
Sure. So the president actually flipped the script on the Ayatollahs here. The Ayatollahs found the international Achilles heel of not just the U.S. economy, but the world economy, and they went for it. And this was the regime's nuclear option. The president, after taking a little bit of pain at the pump for Americans, blocked, parried, and now flipped the script on these guys and is going against all of their imports and exports. He's not just blocking Iran's Persian Gulf ports, but the entire coastline. CENTCOM has brought an appropriate number of assets to do these interdictions and interceptions. The question over time is, will we have the appropriate ISR, the intelligence, the surveillance, the reconnaissance to even monitor the small boats that may come and go? But in terms of tanker traffic, things that can impact Iran's economy, it's just a countdown to the doomsday clock for the Islamic Republic. They already were under the gun before. This was a state that was moving towards failed state status even before the 12-day war last summer. That clock has just been expedited due to President Trump's blockade.
And, of course, a wounded regime is a dangerous one. There's a new report that came out that found that Iran executed at least 1,600 people last year. That's the highest number of executions since 1989. Of course, there were reports of tens of thousands of people just a month and a half ago being executed, people being hung for simply speaking out against the regime. What does that say about the current state of the regime and how they may behave moving forward for a people that is crying out for freedom and yet is still unarmed and unable to take on the government?
Katie, thank you for putting that issue right in the headlights, because I think that's where it deserves to be. This is a population fundamentally that in the part of the world that is usually anti-American and anti-Israeli, this is fundamentally the most pro-American and most pro-Israeli population. We can never forget that. President Trump should not forget that. Prime Minister Netanyahu should not forget that. But to the heart of the matter here, we really won't have a solution until these are the people in power. It's not musical chairs at the top. It's not this commander or that Ayatollah. It's how do you get the Iranian people, fundamentally a nationalist population, to overthrow this Islamist government. And this is a government that has meant everything it says when it puts money, time, assets, and resources towards death to America and death to Israel. So those are the numbers, because the regime, despite this fight against Israel, despite fighting against the Arabs, despite fighting against America, it is more afraid of its own people. And these numbers reflect that fear.
Yeah, horrifying. All right, Elizabeth Pipko, John McCarthy, and Behnam Taleblu, thank you for joining us. Great to see all of you.
Thank you.